Right, and someone who's made his home in New Orleans, and it seemed to fit, is Trent Reznor. Trent and Nine Inch Nails not only make their home here, but they also make their work here. Behind these doors is where The Fragile was painstakingly put together for a couple of years. Live CD, live DVD, and of course the next album in the works. Funeral home turned into a music studio. It's Trent Reznor in New Orleans.
She's ready for her close-up, Mr. DeVille.
Which one of these launches the shuttle?
Lots of buttons here. Actually, I've never been in this room. It's all prop. We just set this up so these guys think I'm smart. This is where it all happens. We, Nothing Studios here in New Orleans. Just accumulated a lot of interesting studio-type trickery that we found that some work better for some things, some for other things, you know. It's always funny when I'm working with Alan Mulder and we're playing guitar or something. I'll be sitting in this zone, all the guitar stuff's kind of around here. And I'll be playing a part, and it's a good part, and I'm trying to talk and play at the same time, and he's on his knees plugging pedals together, and just this kind of mad scientist feel. So, I mean, this room really just reflects the way that we like to work.
Is there a downside, like just personally for your soul and for your craft? Because you just get so swamped in one, you know, you're in this amazing building, but...
I think that's a good point that you bring up. Take The Fragile, for example. I was kind of at a position, a point in my life, you know, and that record was all done right in this room, literally, for over 2 years. And in some ways, it's an interesting kind of journey. It's like I'm able to stop other parts of my life to really just see what happens if you go as far as you can go down a certain path. And that path might lead to somewhere else, and yes, nothing's holding me back from trying that. The price you pay kind of is you become very unbalanced as a human being. And you also start to realize kind of in retrospect that maybe the reason you're doing that is because you're running away from the life you don't know how to live. There's all these things I thought, well, I'll get to that someday, like, you know, a family or real friends or, you know, learning other things, how to do things in life.
Or dealing with this thing that you haven't dealt with.
Yeah, that I've been running away by hiding in a studio. So I'm much more consciously aware of those things I do. We get off the tour bus 2.5 years later, and in my head, I'm thinking I'm going to return to being the real me, but the real me isn't the real me anymore, and maybe it never was me, and who am I now? Am I the guy that's on stage that I read about? And my whole personality had been distorted, and all kinds of external things had come into my world, and people around me that weren't the right, you know, just weird, you know, behind the music scenarios that you see happening to your own life. And there's a reason that everybody's career does the same thing, you know, that you're human. Probably heard it that it debuted at #1 because it gave everyone at the label who only understands bells and whistles and explosions going off, whoa, this must be a big, oh, no, it isn't. You know, it's just that I've got a rabid fan base that bought it immediately. And for it to ever permeate beyond that meant that the company that is very willing to take the money out of my pocket needs to understand what they're selling.
Can you imagine with the conversations in those offices?
Yeah, and I overheard a few. You know, it was very disheartening for me in the sense that I think if the label, I mean, I feel a bit abandoned by Interscope, just to get straight out and say this, that I had a very supportive record label that really believed this is an important album, we're standing behind you. Wow, we didn't think it debuted at #1. Wow, it dropped the next week. Wow, see ya, we're on to the next thing. And they're taking a square peg and trying to force it through the same round hole that the Eminems of the world can fit through, and other artists. Suddenly a record that everyone loved suddenly is now a failure or labeled a failure because of the blurred lines between commercial success and critical success. And it sold more than I thought it would to start with.
Nothing can stop me, 'cause I don't care anymore. Nothing can stop me now, 'cause I just don't care.
Is there the good and the evil? Is this stuff in you?
Just a little light topic conversation here. I've always been attracted to darker things. You know, that's excited me. You know, from how far does things go? You know, if there's a snuff movie, I want to see it. You know what I mean? I'm not supporting it, but yeah, I guess I am. But I am curious. You know, I want to, what's the farthest levels I can go? You know,
I mean, this wasn't the only building for sale.
No, but I'll say this. I mean, there's a couple things you can nail me on. This is was a funeral home. I lived in Sharon Tate's house. You know, and those things, I can say this, you don't need to believe me, but the Sharon Tate thing, for example, they didn't tell us it was that house. I wasn't thinking of, well, I wonder if they're going to take me to the Sharon Tate house. That didn't even cross my mind. It was the coolest house we saw, and later that night I discovered that it was that house, which made it even kind of cooler. Not that I support Manson, who I think is an asshole. Charles, that is. It's a piece of American dark, that's the end of the 60s, you know, that was the end of an era, that whole kind of event, and it was interesting to just be around it. By nature, I'll find myself, I will isolate if I'm left to my own devices. So I'm more aware of what I do, and I try to make myself do some things that avoid that occasionally. I used to really fear being alone and hated it, you know. And lately, I've come to terms with I'm not saying I hope to be alone the rest of my life, but I think everybody is alone, really, you know. And I'm a lot more comfortable with who I am or my head. I'm not real comfortable with being treated as celebrity all the time. I don't think it's good for your soul to be around that. I don't think once you start believing the hype and that you're, you know, in any way more important than anyone else, I think that starts to really corrode a part of you that's important to keep in touch with. When I had a bunch of people convey that, you know, you really don't open up to it, and I'm thinking, yes, I do. And then I realized, no, I really don't. You know,
Is this an intervention?
There's been a lonely guy intervention that's come up in.
Without you, everything falls apart.
Nine Inch Nails, I think, will naturally mutate and has mutated as I've matured and changed, and see what happens. If it comes to the point where a really and more radically different human being, then maybe it's time to not be Nine Inch Nails anymore and just, you know, do whatever might be more appropriate.